All right, so we're on time. It's, oops, 1 second, I gotta get rid of echoes. All right, it's 1 p.m. We are missing a key participant, maybe more than one. And there he is, okay.
Now we can start.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim, for coming. Yes. All right, so we still do need a minute taker. It is an illustrious job, comes with wonderful benefits. We had someone in the back. Did someone just say they'd do it? Okay, terrific. We have a minute taker. Thank you very much. Move over here. Yeah.
Put it towards yourself.
Well, no, yeah, so it makes it easier for us both to use it. All right. Do you want to kick it off? Okay. All right, everyone. This is the SNAC working group. If you're not interested in SNAC, stay, and you will be interested in SNAC. It's a fantastic bunch of people doing good work. We have a full agenda as usual, but first we'll go over the note well, which we are supposed to pause on for an appropriate amount of time so everyone can read that text. If you'd like to look at this text further, you can go on ietf.org/about, and there's a nice link to the note well on there. And you can click on those BCPs at the bottom and follow the links and learn all about the things that you hopefully already know by Thursday. Okay, so we have our meeting documents are, of course, in our SNAC data tracker. We have a note taker. Thank you very much. And our, okay, we know where we are. Hopefully, everyone's signed in. Click the links, scan the QR codes. It's important that we do that so that we get a properly sized room next time, and we're not in a closet. Today's agenda, we'll spend a few minutes on a chairs update. We'll spend some time collaboratively working on the SNAC simple document, as we have done in the past and as we've done in our interim meetings, with even more participation because we have all you wonderful folks in attendance. Is there any question on the agenda? All right. That's good. All right. Here. Okay, so we have two open, well, one draft in this working group and one in 6-man. We're coordinating with 6-man chairs to progress that document with Jonathan and Ted. It looks like we can be reasonably optimistic for an early allocation to be made. For the bit in the RA flag. There's been some updates to that document. It's no longer a 00. I believe it's a 01 or maybe 02 by now. So that's progressing. SNAC Simple, we've had 4 interim meetings since IETF 119. There have been a lot of work on the document and a number of updates. Ted, I believe, is going to give us an overview of those. Yeah, what did we want to say about next steps post-SNAC simple document completion?
Yeah, we touched upon it last time. Our focus is to finish this document and then get the pulse from the room. What do we want to do next? So, yeah, we are focusing on this document, but at the same time, we have to think about, should we continue this group with subsequent work, or this is it, and then take subsequent work to int area or some other work groups. So that's, if we want to talk about it for a couple of minutes right now is a good time. Mr. Eri, would you have some comments or guidance for us?
So Eric Vink, if we don't have any more work, if there is, I don't see any energy to go past the SNAC simple, then clearly we become dormant maybe for one IETF, then we close. Right? There's no point keeping a working group open if there is no work being done there. Simply, basically my same point as last time.
Okay.
Now, if there are energy to do something more, then of course we keep the working group, right?
Lemon. So I don't know whether, so we talked about two different documents, and there have been some discussions about other things that might happen after this, which would require a recharter. The second document is the sort of SNAC less simple document where we try to have SNAC routers connect to networks that provide more services than are provided by, like, you know, home network, for example, or at least by a sort of a current modern home network. We definitely, I mean, I will say from my perspective, working at Apple, we definitely intend to do that work, whether it happens here or not. I'd like to see that work standardized in the IETF. It doesn't have to happen in this working group. I mean, a lot of the work that we would be talking about would be DNSSD stuff. So maybe it could just happen in the DNSSD working group. Some of it might be routing stuff. There it's going to be a little less clear because I don't know, like, it's not really routing stuff in the sense of, like, we need a new routing protocol. It's routing stuff in the sense of, do we need to participate in infrastructure routing, and if so, how? You know, there's also, like, you know, still here, what is it, 2024? We don't have actually a document from DHC explaining how router advertisements are routed. Or sorry, prefix delegation, delegated prefixes are routed. And that's one of the gaps that we have here. So does that document get done in the SNAC working group? I don't know. It needs to get done. This isn't necessarily the right place to do it, but it needs to happen somewhere. And we are definitely a customer of it. So it could also happen in int area or 6-man. But I don't know. I don't see a reason not to do it here unless we think that the right people aren't in the room.
So thank you, Ted, for the explanation. Eric Vink again. I was unaware that you wanted to go further as a vendor. So I think that's a good reason to keep the working group open. You know, if we see the energy behind it, right? So I was wrong. Happy to see that working group does not close. Thank you. And for the DHC, as you know, the DHC working group is also maybe closed, but we can take the DHC work here, no problem.
And of course, I just have one question you're dying for me to ask.
Go for it.
Do you have the drafts? You said you want to do this other work. Do you have drafts ready?
The answer is I haven't had time to think about that yet, but I certainly want to.
Well, you brought it up.
No, I know.
I just want to say, because I think it's important, Ted is doing heroic work, and we really need more help. And we just hired one more person at Apple to work with Ted, so I'm doing my best to take some of the burden off Ted, but I want to acknowledge the amount of work Ted does, both writing code and debugging code and writing the drafts that document it. So yeah, we need more help, and I'm doing my best on my side to help with that.
Yeah.
That wasn't meant as a dig at him.
No, I didn't take it that way. No, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely work that we need to do in terms of writing documents, and that is coming up. But basically, this is all demand paged, right? Like I'm doing this stuff as time is available, and I would really like to get the sort of integrating into infrastructure stuff done sooner rather than later, but it's going to happen at the rate that it happens. If there are other people who are interested in helping with that work, wow. I wasn't trying to, like, find this, ask for the spirits to help me with it.
So
Apparently.
So
I'll just
it-
sit down now.
So for the room, this is unfortunately going to go on throughout the meeting. We've been informed by the facilities folks that this is not unusual this week, unfortunately, as they do construction outside. So yeah. I might have a pair of earplugs.
Yeah, we'll see how the recording comes out.
One other thing is that it's great to hear that that there's likely need for more work. We'll continue to consider that for sure as a working group. And something that's worked well for us in the past has been our interim meetings. We expect that we'll be keeping those up. Just to notice everyone in the room, we would love to get more participation in those as well, and more contributions and contributors involved. So keep that in mind. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
So,
Oh, that's the last slide. Next up is Ted.
just
I've got your slides. That works.
Okay.
Or it will work once I click on them.
All right. Boy, the peanut gallery is really active today. Anyway, so this is just a status update. There's nothing particularly exciting or new to present other than what we've done. So we've been doing a regular.
Yeah, let's see if we can make it taller, Ted.
Oh, is the mic off? No, it's
no,
on.
mic's on.
No, it's just you can't hear me. It's because it's positioned incorrectly. Hopefully this is better. All right. Yeah, but I don't need that much fiber in my diet. Anyway, so we've had a bunch of interim meetings since the last IETF member meeting since IETF 119. And we've been doing document editing in each meeting, and we've made quite a bit of progress. There was a big debate last time about what we should call stub routers, because we decided that stub router was too broad of a term. SNAC routers are a subset of stub routers. And I got to use the fun subset symbol there. I just want to brag about that. So we were kind of having trouble figuring out what term, and somebody just said, why don't you just say SNAC routers? And we were like, okay. So that's what we're doing. So we're calling it a SNAC router, and there's changes littered throughout the document to deal with that. A question came up about prefixes being advertised and what to do when a prefix that was advertised on the Stub network is, by the way, SNAC router, Stub network, because the SNAC router is just one kind of stub router connecting a stub network to an infrastructure network. So Stub network. So if we've been advertising a prefix on the Stub network, and then we decide that we need to deprecate it for some reason, like for example, our prefix delegation wasn't renewed, or some preferable, like maybe we were publishing a ULA prefix and then we got a prefix delegation, so now we're deprecating the old ULA prefix. We still need to advertise a route to that prefix on infrastructure until the valid lifetime expires, because we might have ongoing connections. Somebody might have cached that address and might still be using it. We want it to continue to work as long as it actually can work. There was a question that came up about the L bit in the PIO. So this is the on-link bit. There are some link layers where you don't set the L bit. None of us knew what any of those link layers were or how they worked. So we decided that the best way to solve this problem was to make it out of scope, and we did. The document now says this is out of scope. There was a big debate at IETF 119 about the setting of the M&O bits. We have some people who have still healing wounds from various previous conversations about this. It turns out that RFC 4861 says that the M&O bits have to be consistent on the link, but it doesn't say how to do that. And it turns out that that's actually really hard. In fact, it might even be NP complete. So we aren't doing that. And instead, we are requiring that stub routers set the M&O bits to false. So, yeah, so DHCP prefix delegation is stateful and is dependent on what link you're connected to. And so we added some stuff in the document, mostly just referring to the DHCP v6 protocol specification, explaining how, or really just telling you where to look to figure out how to deal with the problem of what happens if your stub router is suddenly connected to a different network. So just some additional text. Most of it is just pointing at the DHCP document and not actually specifying anything. There was a question about the applicability and purpose of NAT64. There was a lack of clarity about whether we needed that to be bidirectional. And the answer is we don't actually have a way to make it bidirectional, so it ain't bidirectional. And that was never the intention, right? The intention was that this was going to be a way that devices on the stub network could reach out to the internet if they needed to contact internet services. And those services were IPv4 only, because stub networks are IPv6 only. So, so we have quite a bit of additional text talking about this and explaining the motivation and so forth. We added a very brief security consideration section, basically saying read RFC 4861. And we added a long appendix that describes all of the different deployment scenarios we were able to imagine, which if anybody wants to read that and see if there's a deployment scenario that they can imagine that we failed to imagine, please tell us. And basically the idea was just like explain whether a SNAC router would work on this network. And the answer in most cases is yes, and the answer in a small number of cases is no. And that's correct behavior. It shouldn't work on those networks. That's very convenient on our part. And then we added 2 additional sections on RAs, one for what RAs look like when they're advertised on the infrastructure. And the idea was to detail every single field in the RA. So like, an implementer doesn't have to guess or figure it out. It's just specified. And same with RAs sent on the stub network if you're doing router advertisements on the stub network. And the forward button isn't working, so I think that means I'm done.
You're done? Yeah. No, you're done. Yeah, that's it.
That was the last slide. I was kidding. I think Lorenzo wants
Lorenzo's in the queue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really do think that you'll break some deployed implementations if you set the MNO flags to false. I mean, not that I would ever endorse willingly using it, but Network Manager does look at the MNO flags for the purpose of like figuring out whether it needs to do DHCP. I think if you set it to 0, then it won't do DHCP and will just sit there and spin.
So suppose there's an infrastructure router and there's a stub router. And the infrastructure router is sending router advertisements with a router lifetime of 0. Is Network Manager going to prefer the MNO bits that are from the router lifetime 0 router advertisement, or is it going to prefer the ones from the other router, or is it going to just alternate? We talked about this a lot, and the conclusion was it's probably going to, when it sees the MNO bit set to 1, it's going to take advantage of that. And if they get set back to 0, it's not going to change.
But if when you connect, you see the last array that you see is, so Linux has this, it's a printfully flag and you can query it. And so if you start Network Manager, when you just have received an array with the MNO bit set to 0, it won't do DHCP6.
Okay.
And so if your network relies on DHCP6, then I think you broke it. I mean, not that. Anyway, I think you break some.
Clarifying question, Lorenzo. Suppose Network Manager starts up that way, and then it receives a router advertisement with the MNO bit set to 1. What happens then?
Whatever they wanted, I don't know. It might like start again. It might time out. It might read the flag at the beginning. My point is like generally, if you want to say we're not breaking existing implementations, you kind of had to server them. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know how Network Manager works.
So we had this discussion in March, and the conclusion was that we weren't aware of any cases where this would make things worse. The problem is that the spec in RFC 4861 is just wrong. Like there's no way to implement it. This is something that Suresh had to wrestle with quite a bit a few years back. I don't think he's in the room. But,
I mean, I think if you just copy the ones from the most recently received RA, you can just copy them and that's fine. It's strictly better than saying they must be set to
So
0.
what do you mean by the most recently received RA? What if the infrastructure router turns the MNO bits off?
Then you copy 0 from there.
Okay, so then the most recently received one is like the one that we got, the most recently received infrastructure bits that we got. So, all right, so in other words, you're saying that if we receive an RA with the MNO bit set to 1 and the stub router bit set to 0, that we start reflecting those bits.
Yep.
And then if later we receive another RA, possibly seconds later, with the MNO bit set to 0 and the stub router bit set to 0, then we start sending 0 bits.
I would yes, cache the result of the most recently RA that we care about.
Uh-huh.
And we just cache that result. In the next array, we send whatever we heard most
Okay,
recently.
so this is a good suggestion, because what you're basically saying is if the network is broken, we can't fix it.
Yeah.
And if the network is not broken, then we aren't going to break it.
By this. We might.
Right.
You
well,
don't really know.
Well, if we did what you suggested, we wouldn't be breaking it.
It's not perfect, right? For example, what if we haven't heard an array? But you know, it's strictly better than like always setting it to 0.
Yeah, but I mean, we start up with in routers. We start up trying to discover routers. So in principle, if there is a router present, we will know what the bits are supposed to be, and if they're not, then your network is broken.
If the RS gets lost.
But your network is broken. Tough luck.
Packet
We can't magically make networks work that are broken.
I wouldn't describe packet losses. Okay, but anyway, I don't know.
Lots
I mean, I
of
think it's
packet
strictly better than
Yeah.
than setting it to 0. The other thing for L equals 0, we said like there's no we can't think of anything that would do it that way. I mean, people do set it as
What?
Is that a problem?
Can you? Well, no. It could be that something sets it to 0. The point is, what should we set it to?
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
in our PIO.
Yeah. And the answer is we don't know enough about use cases where it would be set to 0 to be able to say. And so that's why we say that's out of scope. Like you don't need to set it to 0 on Wi-Fi. You don't need to set it to 0 on Ethernet. I don't know of a layer 2 where you do need to set it to 0. I'm sure there is one, but I doubt it's one that we care about. So basically what we said is we just don't support that. You know, it doesn't mean that you can't do an implementation for that layer 2. You're just going to have to figure out what the answer is. We're not going to tell you.
I think if you set it to 0, it might just not work, right? Because if there's no default gateway, then the host has nowhere to send it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of unlikely that there's a link type where we can send RAs, but like L equals 1 will not work, I suppose.
Right.
Tim,
Yeah,
maybe
that was our reasoning. Yeah.
Yeah, the only one I'm aware of is DOCSIS. You have to set it to 0 to get it to go back to the CMTS. So they do that on the cable modem side.
Okay.
But that's not a problem for you guys. So I think you're good.
Combination stub router cable modem.
You should be fine.
Yeah. Well, that was actually another discussion we had, which I didn't mention on the slides and which isn't actually currently reflected in the document. But that discussion was, what if you have an infrastructure router that's connecting to a stub network? Is that a SNAC router? And the answer is no. Right? Because like we don't want, like if you're the infrastructure router, just be an infrastructure router. Don't be an infrastructure router and a SNAC router. I've seen implementations that do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah, there's some trickiness you'd have to do there.
Yeah.
Two winners while I'm really here is the MNO flags. I don't remember how many times we've talked about this. Part of me doesn't want SNAC to try to solve this problem because this is a problem now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody in the world, nobody has ever done the coordination of those flags, right? It's something that's existed since 2460, right? That's never sunk up. I don't know why SNAC would try to solve it, but if you're going to do something, I guess do Lorenzo's suggestion would be better.
Well, yeah. I mean, what Lorenzo's point is not don't solve it or not
right,
do
don't
solve
make it
it,
worse.
but don't break it.
Yeah. So
I think
that's the thing. I would
Yeah.
be cautious of actually trying to actually solve the problem. Like just don't. That's why you should limit yourself to just not doing any harm, because it's not a great situation, and I don't think this
Yeah.
group should be tasked with solving that situation.
That's fair. Jen.
Yeah, just with my 6-man chair hat on. I just realized it is a problem because I guess You cannot achieve consistency if you have multi-home network, for example, right?
Right.
It's like fundamentally impossible. So thanks for pointing
Correct.
this out. And I think maybe, I don't know if you can fix it, but at least I guess we can try to fix the standard at least.
Yeah, we
I
should
don't
do
think we
that,
can
but
fix
not
the
here.
real world, right? But yeah, I agree with what Tim said. Yeah, I don't think you need to fix this problem, right? We can at least talk in 6 months about what to do about the current state of theoretical affair
Yeah.
and see if the real world can follow.
Yeah, sorry, not in the queue. It might be worth trying again to say that the MNO bits are just meaningless, and then say that new implementations just like must not look at them, because we didn't do that. Like we basically said we deleted some text and we thought that was okay, but it's not.
We didn't
right?
think that was okay.
Okay, so we just deleted some text.
We were in the
and-
rough.
Yeah.
At least I was.
Okay. Well, anyway, maybe things have moved on and we can actually say that they're meaningless and new implementations must not look at them. I don't know what would happen if you go to Linux and say, please delete this flag. I suspect they would say that their user space compatibility guarantee overrides the IETF, but they might not.
Yeah. Okay. Now what?
Could you give some brief updates on what's still missing in the document? And
gosh.
so, which will get us ready for
That would have
the
been a really
last-
smart thing to do on the slides, wouldn't it? Hang on a sec.
So this begins our interactive session. Did you want the issues listed?
So at present, we have 19 open issues. Somebody added one while I was refreshing. Some of them seem like they're editorial. I'm going to just see if I can come up with the ones that aren't. Okay. Somebody suggested mentioning RA guard. So I think we do actually mention RA guard in the appendix and the analysis of different types of deployments. Elliot says, outline general solution. I think the document suffers from a lack of at least one architectural diagram and a general description of the solution. This also has led to bloating of the definitions section. Definitions should really only be 1 or 2 sections, but you're cramming context in the definitions that belongs elsewhere. These are fair points. Okay, so that's something we could definitely do. That's a significant change. Document, so we talked about, I just mentioned this, that SNAC routers are not really needed for managed infrastructure. If it's managed infrastructure, it's not really a SNAC router. Like in other words, if you are controlling something on the SNAC router, it's not a SNAC router because it's not auto configuring, right? So there's a question about interrupt goals. Are the RA requirements for the SNAC router only for RA beacons or also for unicast arrays? That's a fun question. The answer, I think, is yes. Clarify. Are the RA requirements for SNAC router only for RA beacons or also for unicast arrays? Unicast array is when somebody sends a router. A beacon is the one that you send, you multicast. Unsolicited, yeah.
Unsolicited, yeah.
Yeah, I use the term beacon in my code. I don't know. We might even use it in the document. I'm not sure.
It was used.
Uh-oh. I should probably fix that.
Yeah, you should get rid of that.
Okay, good. Yeah, so the sort of the open item is we need a state machine for NAT64. We also concluded during one of the interims, but I don't see it as an issue here, that we need we need a state machine for, so the state machine for the RA on infrastructure and the state machine for the RA on the stub network turn out to be sufficiently different that our attempts to avoid documenting the second one failed. And so we actually do need to write a state machine for the stub router advertisement as well. One thing that's missing from that also occurs to me is one thing that's missing from the stub router side is we don't talk about how we advertise the SRP service, which is required on the stub side. So that's another thing, and that's part of what would also maybe be connected to the follow-on document, the SNAC complex document. Let's see. So there's text here asking to clarify how stub router and home gateway can be combined in one device. I think we actually do need to write that text, even though it's out of scope. We need to say it might make sense to make a device that does something like a stub router that is a home router. And if you do that, this document does not describe how that works. But you probably need to do some of the same things.
So this goes to some of my editorials.
Mhm.
You spend an awful lot of time conjecturing in various places about what could or would, and then say, oh, but that's out of scope.
Yeah,
It's exhausting.
sorry.
Keep the spec compact to the point you're trying to solve.
Okay.
Everybody will assume that if you didn't solve the problem in this document, it was out of scope.
So do you mean that with respect to the L-bit?
If you don't solve it in the document, then it's
So
out of scope by definition.
I guess one thing to say about all of that, Elliot, is that every single time that we say that something is out of scope in the document, it's because we had a conversation about it here and we're trying to decide whether or not it was in scope. So it might make sense to just have an appendix that says these are the things that are out of scope and why they're out of scope, rather than having it in line. So you don't have to read it unless you want to.
Right. There's another example of this, by the way. Let me just find it. So I opened an issue on just this point. Just give me a sec.
And this section, by the way, could be a remove on publication section.
Right. So I mean, you do the same thing. If you look at issues, what is it? 69 is this? Yeah, 69. Right. You have actually conflicting text in the document. And at the end of the day, it says nothing in this document is intended to prevent this from being done. I think it's talking about this is exactly the home gateway devices versus SNAC routers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But neither do we attempt to solve the problem the problems that this could create, right? So there's some conflict, and actually it simplifies your document somewhat dramatically when you reduce that intro and gets rid of your conflicting text. So. Right. I think this is editorial, so I'll take it offline with you, right? I don't want to waste the working group's time, but I would try and keep the intro compact so people just know what you're trying to do and then they see how you're trying to do it.
Okay. Yep. I mean, how do you feel about the appendix?
Yeah, if you want. I mean,
The reason to do it is just because otherwise we keep having these conversations, right? Like I don't want to have to say 15 times the reason that thing you want to do is out of scope and we're not doing it.
Right. I mean, I have no problem with an appendix, especially if you're going to remove it prior to publication. I think that's fine.
Okay.
Right? Even if you want to record the decision and keep it, nobody mostly reads those appendices, anyway. Sure. So, whatever. It's just if they're trying to get the grasp of your document early on, and they're and they have to wade through a lengthy dissertation.
Yeah.
But
All right.
Ted, we have to be careful that appendix should not be same size as the main document. It's growing.
Oh, I think we're going to get to the point where the appendix is bigger than the main document. But that's why remove before publishing, right? Like, I mean, we can debate that, but yeah. Okay, Tim.
Hi, Tim Chang. Yeah, I think it's really useful to have a list of the things that you've thought about, but you've explicitly not considered there, so that whether it's in the final publication or not, having that list of things that you can come back to if you need to could be useful.
We could also have the final version be like here are the things and one or two sentences about each one, and have the explanation be that gets removed on publication be longer,
Um,
if we're
I-
really concerned.
I personally don't have any problem with having a big appendix, and I think it can actually be useful in some cases. You can have a document that is 3 or 4 pages of a really simple design, and if you just want to read it and believe the authors, you don't have to read very much. If you read it and don't believe the authors, then there's a whole bunch of supporting information that explains the reasoning, which is up to you if you care about that. I think that's a fine way to have a document.
Okay. So I'm okay with bike shedding some more on this, but we could also move on. All right. Sorry, was that rude? Yeah. So what's next?
Next is the issues list. And yeah, what to work on first with this group now that we're assembled. Do we,
Is there a specific one you want to talk about?
or is there a specific one the working group wants to talk about?
Well, so that's a good question. So looking at this issue list, are there any things that folks would really like to work on here now?
This is really a question for the chairs too, right? If you guys have the time, you might as well just go through them so you'll.
That's what we've been doing in the interims. You've been, you
Okay.
know. Yeah, just the question was, is there like something that anybody in particular wants to work on now first? But, so.
Okay,
We're
let's,
gonna have a little bit of an AV problem here.
we're going to,
Why
we're going to
don't
do
you
like
take my
before.
chair?
We got
I'll sit
3.
over there.
We've got 3, yeah. I'm going to move my stuff around and you can join us here. And we'll, you want to, is that mic? We can move it to you or we can move this one. All right, there we go.
AV folks may become angry at us.
There we go. We will share.
Get revenge.
This.
All right, so I guess we don't have a way to, maybe if you can keep the issue. Yeah, I will. Let's see.
Yeah, go ahead and do what I just did and bring up. But right now, so right now with the list of issues, if anyone wants to go on GitHub issue tracker for the SNAC simple draft, you can take a look at what's there. The list is up on the screen. We can take a moment, read through these, and pick out a favorite. And feel free to raise your hand and call it out at the mic while we do some cleanup on this end and get ready to edit.
Okay, so current version's 05, right?
So,
All right. Excuse me.
I'll just double check. Correct. 05.
All right. So. Let's see.
Okay, oh, thank you. Ah, yes. I didn't click on the open items issue.
So I'm pretty much ready to go.
Okay. Do you have a preferred issue to knock off first?
Well, so let's see. I mean, is there any reason not to just start?
Prefix? Well, yeah, some of them are, a lot of the first ones are editorial. So we go top to bottom.
Section references on match state.
That is a simple one. We can do that later. This is editorial.
Okay.
Okay. Definition of SNAC network.
There is no such thing, and we actually, you can resolve that issue. We already dealt with that.
Okay.
There was, this issue is something we unintentionally added the term SNAC network in an interim version of the document, which we have since removed.
Mention RA guard.
Okay, there is a section in the appendix called Use on a Managed Network, which explicitly mentions RA guard in some detail. So I think this issue, let's see. Yeah, this is already in the appendix. I don't think we need to do anything further.
Do we need to add reference to 6105? I don't think we have it.
Well, that's fair.
Want to stick it in?
Yeah.
David Lamparter. If that is in the appendix, then that should probably stay in the document when it's published. I'm referring to that earlier discussion.
Yeah, this appendix we're probably keeping. This appendix we're probably keeping.
Yeah, that's the only other thing is make sure you put a reference in there. There's no reference to RA guard.
Do you want me to share my editor?
Yeah, I think might as well, right?
I
can
think
read
the
out.
editor, yeah, we can.
Okay, so I'll read out the issues, and then we'll go by the editor. Okay, and everyone can follow along on the issue tracker. I'll call it the issue number. I'd like to once again thank the Jackhammer for the wonderful music today. Okay, issue 75. Oh, you want to, we need to grant permission. Hold on 1 sec. Go back yet. Do you see it? Can you grant it? Okay.
All slots for requested media are already taken.
Okay, I need to stop the screen share. There we go. Perfect. All right, we'll give it a moment to. If you want to
Wow,
expand
that's
and enlarge,
terrible.
you're going to have to enlarge the font.
It's like really bad. How is it so bad? Oh, no, that's better.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It will resolve. It got better. So
Yeah.
it starts out bad, but it gets better
Well,
shortly. If you can make your font bigger, that might help the
Yeah,
poor algorithm.
I don't think that's the problem. I can, you know.
It's good here. Okay, let's try going with that and see it if it improves.
The problem with this is it's actually a little bit hard to read this way. But
It's improving, yes.
okay. All right. So I just added a reference to RFC 6105.
Right, that issue's closed. Issue 75 is outline a general solution.
Okay, that sounds
From
like. it
Elliot, that's a
requires
big-
Drawing, I don't think we're gonna do that right now.
Yeah, I think so. All right, issue 74 is just an editorial comment to fix AILs.
Looks like that happens exactly once.
Okay,
So we got it.
excellent. Let's, we'll clear that.
I'm not sure if it's once, but yeah, okay.
I only see it once. And we definitely say AILs more than one time, but it's always correct everywhere else that I can find.
Okay, so issue 72 is document that SNAC routers are not really needed for management infrastructure. All right, this one's from you, Ted. If you connect to a thread network to a managed network and want to manage the thread network, you are not using a SNAC router, and hence SNAC does not need to support this use case.
So.
Yeah, so in this part, just go up to the mic. You don't need to raise your hands, folks. I think you should not be taking notes for this. If we get to anything, hugely substantial, go ahead and jot it down, but this will be exhausting.
So. I think it's easier to read this way, even if the fonts are fuzzy. Okay, so this sounds like something that goes in the introduction. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, let's.
But this also sounds like it's going to be, this is out of scope for this document. So, I don't know. Elliot, you're the expert on what's out of scope. Yeah.
Yeah. Just take that.
I was going to say, I'm not sure you need to do anything for this. All right, let me go to the mic. I mean, if you want, you can stick this in that big appendix that you're going to create, but I'm not sure there's anything you need to do for this, because for one thing, I'm not actually sure what it means to manage a thread network along these lines. In terms, having a managed thread network, I'm not sure what that means. I don't want to get into a semantic debate over it. Right? That's a good meaty topic for some other time. So yes, it's out of scope. I don't really think you have to say that, right? There are all sorts of circumstances that we could imagine that are out of scope.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the introduction. The introduction says that describes automatically connecting IPv6 stub networks to adjacent infrastructure networks. Just trying to remember if it said anything about them not being managed.
Yeah. So I just added some text that says what we mean, and this is in the introduction. I think this kind of makes sense in the introduction. The text just explains that what we mean by automatically connecting is that the SNAC router connects to the stub network without requiring an operator to do some special thing or understand how networking works any more than the operator of a mobile phone, a smartphone needs to know how the network works.
Yes, so with this text, I would just, where it says sharing the Wi-Fi password, I would change password to credential.
There you go. Okay.
Good.
All right. Close that.
All right, Elliot had noted some conflicting text between introduction and stub network definition. That's correct, issue 69.
So let me just talk about this for a moment. Essentially, what I think we said at some point, and I don't have the entire document in my head, but I think we said at some point that a SNAC router specifically is not that does not do, like a stub network does not do routing, right? And this I think this muddles the waters, right? It says, well, but maybe you could try. And, I would say that there's a conflict between the definition and the introduction and the other text below. So I would actually remove both the introduction and the other text below. And along these lines, a lot of things may be noted. We don't have to note them all.
Right. I mean, again, the reason it came up is because it came up.
So then is this a candidate for maybe appendix? Is that what you're adding there? Non-goals, I see.
It goes into the appendix. All I can say is make sure that it's clear that it doesn't conflict with a normative text, right? Which is, I think, that is a non-editorial point, right? So it feels like that there's some conflict in this text. So that's what I would just look at.
Okay, so I added text saying this section records some non-goals of the document that were discussed as we were working on the document. The text in this section is not normative and is specifically being added to avoid repeating discussions which have already concluded that some proposed functionality for SNAC routers is out of scope for this document. Okay, so was there additional text I need to remove?
There was the introduction text.
So I got the paragraph in the intro.
Maybe noted, then
Yeah,
that's gone.
I've removed all that text.
Okay. Okay, I think it's good.
All right.
It can get reviewed when 06 gets published, but yeah, we'll close it.
Okay.
All right, next is 68 stub network definition. A sentence in the definition of stub network is there is reachability through a stub network router to hosts on the stub network. Oh, this is a reference from the previous one. Well, maybe I'll read it out fully. There's reachability through a stub network router to hosts on the stub network, but there's no reachability through the stub network to any link beyond the stub network. Elliot, you know this is redundant given the previous sentences and could confuse people. I think, however, though, this has this been removed as part of the edits that you were just made?
Let me look at the current text. A network link that is connected to one or more stub routers by one or more stub routers to an AIL let's just say to an infrastructure network, but is not used for transit between a link on an infrastructure network, but is not used for transit between that link and any other link.
Which issue is this, by the way?
This was 68. 68.
Okay, so RC 2328 describes the distinction between stub networks and transit networks. Okay, so the proposal is to just remove the last sentence, it sounds like.
Yeah, the but.
The but, just the but?
Wow. Yeah.
So I think we need to say only two hosts are also.
Yep.
So this is going to make sense. Okay. Okay. So the other thing is that we use the term stub network router. Stub router. Because we're talking about a stub network and stub networks. So normally we've been using the term stub router and not the term stub network router.
I'll look at this when I see the update.
Okay, so.
All right, I think we got that one.
Yep.
68 closed. 67. We need to specify the advertising of routes to be deprecated. Oh, of routes to deprecated prefixes. So we need to specify the advertising of routes to deprecated prefixes. 67.
Okay, so. Router advertisements on the infrastructure network.
So note here was we covered advertising routes to stub links on infrastructure in stop sending
so we actually-
RAs as state.
We actually do cover this here. So route information option, an active SNAC router always provides a route information option. Sorry. An active SNAC router always provides a route information option for each prefix that is valid on the stub network. This provides a route from the infrastructure network to the stub network. The following settings apply, ... So I think we could add something here, except this section isn't supposed to be normative, really. I mean, it kind of is normative, though. I think this is actually the right place to do this, and we should just add another sentence here that says this includes prefixes that have been deprecated and are no longer being advertised if they are still valid. Except that's now starting to look like a lot of text.
Yeah, 2 lines below router lifetime. I think this is also referring to 67.
I think that's all we need to say, right?
Yes.
So I want to change this text a little bit though. So So this is actually an interesting point.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a pain in the neck.
You can just take the mic off there, Ted.
Yeah, you can just take it off,
Hold it in your
Ted.
hand.
Ted, my only question here is you have the phrase no longer valid, and it's obviously valid lifetime, so it gets, this is going to confuse the heck out of people. Part of me wanted me to just write there, a SNAC active router always provides router information for prefix that have a valid lifetime on the stub network. And then if you want, you can stick a comma, this includes deprecated prefixes with valid lifetimes. The screwy part is the next sentence you say, are deprecated and no longer being valid on the stub network, but they still have a valid lifetime, so they're still valid. So you don't want to say that. Yeah, something like that I think would work fine. Yeah, I think you just say it in one sentence and get rid of that second one. Because it's the preferred lifetime 0, but the valid lifetime is something greater than 0.
So an active SNAC router always provides a route information option for each prefix advertised on the stub network that has a non-zero valid lifetime at the time the RA is being sent. That's more specific. This includes prefixes that are deprecated and are no longer being advertised. On the stub network. Routes to prefixes by other stub routers. So here, this is where I was getting to. I was about to say something about this, and then we changed the subject. I'm actually wondering if this is true, because so if some other stub router has advertised a prefix, but we didn't advertise it, it's kind of not our problem. And the reason that's important is because suppose the stub network is a type of network that can partition, so that you know, at one point, 2 stub routers both were connected to the same stub network, and then a partition occurred, and now one stub router is connected to network A, partition A, and the other stub router is connected to partition B. We don't want the stub router that's connected to partition A to continue advertising the prefix that was being advertised by the stub router connected to partition B, because now it's no longer a valid route to that prefix. So I think the answer is that we should specifically exclude prefixes that were not advertised by this particular router.
So is it just as simple as excluding them and let them time out?
Yeah, I mean, so it's possible that the other stub router just went away, in which case the prefix that it was advertising isn't reachable anywhere. But I don't think we can really fix that problem.
Why does it say this stub network? Is it implicit that it's stub network, the one it's authoritative for, or?
So,
Because there's no such thing as the stub network. There could be more than one, right? So.
I mean, in principle, there can be more than one, but I think it's not even a simplifying assumption to say we only really need to speak about one specific stub network, and the behavior, if you have more than one, then you're going to be implementing the same behavior for each stub network. And so now if you have a router that's advertising RAs that advertise routes to stub networks to which it has reachability, obviously it has to aggregate that. And I suppose we could say that explicitly. But that feels like this is already, this little list item in this appendix is starting to get pretty heavyweight.
But isn't it just the first sentence that really matters? And everything else can be deleted?
No, right? I mean,
Is
the
it
fact that you
non-zero?
need to the fact that it needs to be like, it needs to continue to advertise deprecated prefixes kind of is important, right? I mean, I don't know if there's any other text in the,
So I thought it sounded like we weren't continued to advertise deprecated prefixes. So
So, no. So the idea is we're going to advertise, suppose, like there are a number of scenarios that can happen, right? One is stub router A is connected to the stub network. Stub router B is connected to the stub network. Stub router A has been advertising a prefix on the stub network. Stub router B manages to get a DHCP-v6 prefix and starts advertising that. That supersedes the ULA prefix that stub router A was advertising. So that ULA prefix is still valid. And so we still want at least router A to be advertising a route to it, but it's deprecated, so we don't.
but it's not deprecated.
what do you need
Is
to?
it deprecated in terms of router A's understanding of that?
Well, so the question is, does router A need to take responsibility for advertising a route to it? And I think the answer is no. So that was our, yeah.
I don't understand why you need to involve PD in this. Like, even if you have two stub routers that, have.
Well, yeah, I
separate-
mean, the other scenario would be you have two stub routers, they both connect at the same time, they both advertise a prefix. One of them notices that its prefix is not the winning prefix and stops advertising it.
No, wait a minute. So there's only one stub router, right? But there can be like 3 SNAC routers, right?
Oh, no, so the distinction between stub router and SNAC router is that a SNAC router is a particular kind of stub router. This document only specifies behavior for SNAC routers. It does
Okay,
not
sorry,
specify
no.
behavior for stub routers.
That's not there. I didn't use the right terminology. Let's say that there are 3 entirely partitioned from each other stub networks on this link.
Okay,
So there's BRA, I'm going to call it BRA, BRB, BRC, right? So one of these is the one that sets the stub router flag. One of these is responsible for originating the PIO on the link.
right.
I don't know I don't know what term I should use for that one.
That's I think we call that the acceptable prefix or something like that.
Well, I mean, sure, but like there's one of the routers, only one of the routers will advertise it, right? Or
No,
not?
but it's not special. It just happened to win. It's not a special.
It's special
router.
because it won. Okay, it's special because it won.
All right.
There's only one of them that wins, okay?
Yeah.
But the other 3 each presumably advertise the things that are behind them.
Yep.
Right. So I think that's like really not clear here, right?
So this is talking about the route information option.
Yes. So the RIO, all of BRs A, B, and C in my previous example must announce RIOs for their EULAs, right?
Right.
Obviously, right? And they, I would argue, must not advertise any of the other EULAs. Like A must never advertise B and C in their RIO.
Right, but why would they?
Well, I mean,
Do you think this document says they should?
I'm just looking at text on the screen. That is very,
What?
yeah.
It is. Yeah, so I mean, I think, what do we mean by the stub network here?
You tell me. If we can't agree on what it means, then we have a problem, right?
Well,
So how about like if we
this
say this?
document isn't talking about like the operational practices for multiple stub networks on an adjacent infrastructure link. It's talking about implementing a stub router. So we don't care about what some other stub router is doing, and we don't have any information about what that other stub router is doing other than what we see in its RA.
So I guess I think maybe the confusion is an active SNAC router. Did we have a meaning for active?
So I think your problem is advertised then, because if I going back to my example with A, B, and C, B is advertising, is sending a PIO, and you could totally argue that is like meets the meaning of advertised here. So I think you would say each RAO that it has previously sent. Because advertise could mean that you're advertising a PIO, which is like really not what you mean here, right?
So
has been advertised. You could argue that a prefix is being advertised you could argue that I'm advertising a prefix if I send a PIO for it. Oh, no, okay. No. What? You mean RAO here, right?
no, I don't understand why you're making this weird distinction, which, is
Oh,
not a
it's
problem.
stub
I'm
networks.
not
I see,
mad
I
at
see.
you.
Okay, got it.
But no, so here's the thing. We're talking about, so we've got two different networks that we're notionally using RAs on. We've got the stub network that we're using, we have a specific one SNAC router, the implementation whose behavior we're talking about here, that SNAC router is advertising 0 or more PIOs on the stub network. And here we're talking about representing each of the prefixes advertised in a PIO in a route.
I do understand
RA.
now. Sorry.
Okay.
I do understand now. I do think the text has improved. Yeah. And I think one thing here is like if they're deprecated, doesn't mean they're no longer being advertised necessarily. They could still be advertised as deprecated.
Right. So here we're just saying non-zero valid lifetime.
Yeah. So the text below is going to be deleted. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, are we overthinking this because it's going to time it out anyway? Like, should we just not be sending these options?
Not be sending routes to the stale prefixes?
Yeah, because if it goes away and you stop sending them, anybody who saw it should have a timer and will time it out eventually.
Right.
So,
so here's the problem.
Anybody new who comes on doesn't care anyway because you've already deprecated it.
Right.
So I actually think we're overthinking this because you send a PIO and IO for previous, and then if you deprecate those prefixes, you just remove them and all the devices, it'll go away.
Is Abton on?
Who's that?
Is Abton on the chat?
No.
This was actually.
Can you hear me? Yes, I am.
Oh my
Yep, I am. Yep.
Go for it, Abd.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, I recall this. I remember we discussed about this in the thread group as well. And there are pros and cons. I think what Ted mentioned is actually correct. So we want the device itself that was publishing basically the unlink on the stop router and deprecated to say deprecate to still continue to also advertise the route on the other side, on the AIL side that we refer to it. And I think call it like that. The main reason is that if devices are still using this old address, devices have this communication with each other, they can continue to use that route and use that border router or use that stub router.
Abton, is there any way you can speak up? You're actually almost impossible to hear. It may be on our end, I don't know.
I can read the transcript. So But it's still going to time it out, right? It doesn't, we don't need to keep sending these lifetimes out on the network, right? Because it's just timing it down. So we're making this all complicated. And if you just got rid of it, they would do the same thing. Yeah.
I think what Tim is saying is, at time I'm stub router A, right? And I previously had in my stub network a prefix, and that prefix is now deprecated, right? And I had previously been sending RAOs on the infrastructure network saying, you can reach this prefix, you can reach this prefix, right? Now that prefix is deprecated. And the question arises, should I keep sending these RAOs, right? And I think what Tim is saying is, anyone who heard those RAOs, including hosts, will still be able to reach them.
Right.
Anyone, and so anyone who has not heard those RAOs will not be able to reach them. However, the point of deprecated addresses is to continue existing connections. And therefore, we don't need to tell new hosts on the link how to reach the deprecated prefixes because they don't care, because there's going to be no connection there. I think that's what you meant, right?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, I think we're overcomplicating it, I guess is my point. I think we can just say, get rid of them. And yes, sorry, there's no need to advertise the deprecated ones. Yes.
Do you want to suggest some text for this, Ben?
Yes, I'll go to the issue tracker. Hang on.
Okay, so I just changed the text to say a non-zero preferred lifetime.
Yes. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah, but we should still say why not. People don't care why. Well, we're going to forget, I guarantee it. The next chance to do the issue. I'll remind you, I promise.
Okay, I like this because at least it basically. I think it's good because at least it'll remind us, like it'll remind our future selves that we did think of it and like we were convinced of it enough that we wrote it down and we just didn't just forget it.
Yeah, so I know Apton, you had been advocating this on Thread. Do you understand Tim's point? Does it make sense to you?
Oh, can you hear me? Sorry, my connection is really poor and I keep dropping off. So,
I can hear you now.
okay. So yeah, I was looking at the basically the discussion inside the thread group on this. This is actually originally ESCO was the one who proposed this.
Oh, okay.
Let me read this and see what was the background for this. Yeah, I agree that it's been time out and fix itself, but I think it was just for the transient part. If there are any existing connection devices that are still using this route, the device that was publishing and deprecating, like that, basically like there's no harm in it still continuing to have the RIA.
Issue was about the route on the Thread network, right? We wanted to make sure that we didn't take down the reachability on the Thread network.
It's both sides, right? So you don't want to remove the addresses like immediately as the prefix goes away. You want to deprecate the addresses. Like the devices should still continue to accept messages from the already being deprecated prefix.
Okay.
And then the route should still exist with them. That like devices on the AIL side can still be able to reach those addresses.
So what we really need to say, and it doesn't belong in this section because it's got nothing to do with RAs, is that the deprecated prefix, the router needs to continue routing to the deprecated prefix until it expires. That's the issue. Does that make sense?
Correct, yes. But then the question here is that whether the devices on AIL should have a route towards this, should be able to use the border router or use to see this as a path towards that.
Yeah.
Because they go hand in hand. That like the devices still provides the route, but also includes this in the RIOs that is advertising. That hey, if you want to reach this prefix, come to me. I know how to get to these guys.
So, I mean, I'm not fully understanding other than the sense that
Right.
if they're, I mean, PD snooping, right? We have the same problem, right? Because you look at a prefix, if you're a snooping relay agent, you install the route and you have to keep it there until the valid lifetime of the prefix goes away. So I think that's the problem you're having. I don't know where you get the lifetimes from though, in your case. On the thread side, maybe it is through the RIO, but it's the same issue. Yeah, you have to keep the route. And I think that could be something you could say from a routing perspective for sure. You have to keep the route until the lifetimes expire.
Right, but we don't need to advertise it to new hosts because
No,
they
you
aren't
definitely
going to use
don't.
that prefix.
Yeah, but you're right. The routes you want to keep for the same.
Right. Okay. So, you had an issue.
Do we just want to add?
You could do that. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just add some text to this one. But we're gonna resolve that here though, right? Which I think you just need to say, continue routing to that prefix. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a kind of a can of worms. I don't know that we ever actually said anything about forwarding. I'm just going to look through the document a little bit to see if I can find a place where we can put this.
Okay, so I found a basically related discussion on the chat group on the spec. I don't know for the record if you want to look it up later. Is spec 1222.
Apton, if you could get closer to your microphone somehow.
I'm actually here. I'm using the AirPods, so I cannot
Oh,
get any
okay.
closer to the microphone. So, yes, and I think at least there, like in the text, you were thinking that the border router, which in this case would be the stub router, SNAC router, must continue to advertise its reachability on every unmeshed prefix following the ones that are deprecated or the ones that are deprecated for the time period, blah, blah, or mod address deprecation. Okay. But yeah, I can see that like not doing so would also be fine. So yeah, it's not it's basically either way I feel it will work out. So it's not something that you may want to spend too much time on.
Okay, so I am scrolling through the document, and we never once actually specify that SNAC routers have to provide IP forwarding between the stub network and the infrastructure network in any way at all. What's that?
It's a router.
It's obvious.
It's a given.
It implies that we don't have to specify it for.
Yes.
Anyway, so we need to add some text about this. Like we just literally don't have any text about this at all.
Sorry, but Ted, you don't need to say that a router routes packets, do you? It's going to forward.
I have worked with companies that would ship a product and claim it met their spec completely and
Yeah.
forwarded no packets. We need to say that.
Yeah, it's sending the right router advertisements. I don't know why no packets are flowing. It's obviously a bug in the spec.
That's called a competitive advantage, I believe. We should let them keep doing that.
It's going to be amusing to see what you were able to write there. Because like the obvious thing around must forward packets is going to fall over immediately as soon as somebody says we need a firewall. So
Oh, no, we've had that discussion.
But is
That's
it,
the job of the RFC 7084 router. That's not our
I see.
problem.
So, okay, I see. So, okay, so it must forward all packets. That's nice.
Yes.
That's great. Like, that's great because like I actually got into trouble with the thread team when they said that we needed a firewall between the AIL and the thread network. I was like, we can't implement that. And they said, you must. I'm like, do it in OT daemon or something. And they did. But anyway, maybe that's not a SNAC requirement, but a thread requirement.
Well, I mean, you definitely, I mean, it's a constrained network. So you definitely need to make sure that you're not forwarding packets to the constrained network faster than they can be delivered.
Yeah, this is a thing. So I guess I'm going to have to open an issue on this.
Okay.
Maybe we'll have to revisit it. I don't know. But any forwarding device has to be able to be defensive. It's just that simple. Any part of your infrastructure, any part of anybody's infrastructure can be attacked and can be harmed. So there's a need at least for some amount of defensiveness.
Yeah, I think we can work out wording to cover this. The intention with the thread border router is that conceptually it's like an Ethernet switch or a Wi-Fi access point in bridge mode, that you plug it in, it connects, it doesn't get in the way. Now that said, having extra admin options where if you want your Ethernet switch to filter certain packets, you can buy a high-end switch that does that. But I think our language should be that by default it should forward all packets. That doesn't, but must. By default, it must forward all packets in both directions. But if you want to add some manual configuration or otherwise, that's okay. But out of the box, we want an average user. And remember, the target market here is home users. So we want them to plug it in and have it work and not have to call Geek Squad to fix it.
I remember now when I got into trouble. There was like, oh, but this port must never be forwarded because it's security sensitive. And then it was like, oh, the OMR range is okay to forward, but the LMR, so the mesh local, must never be forwarded. And I'm like, okay, well. So anyway, I don't know if that, maybe they were trying to, pull a fast one on me. I don't know, but.
Yeah, so the mesh local prefix is essentially intended to be analogous to a link local prefix.
But then that must not be forwarded.
So yeah, must not be forwarded is right. It's link scope. Well, it's it's mesh scope.
It pleases me that we are learning more about this requirement as time goes on.
Lucky you. Glad we're able to help.
Okay.
Good logical time to close.
Yeah, right. So Kieran just reminded me we've got 1 minute left in this meeting slot.
Oh, this is an hour-and-a-half slot. Damn. All right, well, this was actually a good place to stop because I'm going to need to actually sit down and think about this
part
text.
needs some text, and maybe
Yeah.
we need a subsection just to dedicate it to this, to talk about it somewhere.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to rush into this section.
Yeah, no, but this is really good because like this is a glaring omission that we hadn't even noticed
We
until
did
now.
talk
Did we?
about host to device communication though, reachability. We did discuss
Reachability,
that.
but forwarding.
Okay.
Yeah, like it's funny that we didn't think of this. Yeah, it's totally obvious.
Okay. Anything else in the last 30 seconds? No? Okay, the interim meetings will be scheduled, sent to the list. Thank you everyone for participating.
Is there any preference for time slots so that we get more attendance for interim meeting?
Early is better for me.
Yeah, we can poll it again on.
Yeah, so I generally assume that the default time zone is California because that's where my employer is. So when I say early, I mean relative to California. So in other words, I want the people in California to have to suffer. No, wait. You didn't hear me say that.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, guys. I have to rush.
Of course.
Thank you and nice meeting you.
You too. Again.
That went very fast. Oh my God.
This document is a can of worms.
Well, I honestly don't think we should be documenting anything about forwarding. Like, we're describing the behavior of a router. A router is already defined.
If the reachability is, I mean, if reachability is there, forwarding should work.